Welcome to Rise Up CX Talk. This is the podcast where we discuss ideas and strategies on how to transform experience into business growth. I am your host, Camila Ferreira. I am an international speaker, an award-winning CX leader, and more recently, an author of Long Live CX that is available on Amazon. Today, I have the pleasure to welcome Henrique Setton. Henrique is a Brazilian like me, but he's a business strategist with experiences in different countries, including the US. He has had the experience and the chance to invest in his own business, but also lead major organizations across Americas. So, Henrique, thank you so much for taking the time of being here and share with us. I know that today we're going to have a long conversation about transformation, but before anything, please welcome to the show and introduce yourself.
Hello, Camila. Thank you so much for having me here. It's such a pleasure to be part of your podcast. Everyone, I'm Henrique. I have a pretty long background in both Brazil and the US. I spent over 15 years in the US in both entrepreneurial ventures and in big tech companies such as Apple, SAP, Dayforce, and more recently in Brazil at Pagify. My main role in those organizations is to lead strategy, operations, go-to-market, and in summary, transformation, right? Transformation through customer success, through strategy, and through the whole customer journey. So I'm very pleased to be here. I'm excited about this call, about this discussion.
Wow, it's so funny that we are both Brazilians talking in English about transformations that we both drove in different countries. That's amazing, right? Because that's how we connect local experiences with global opportunities. Today, the topic that we're going to discuss is actually transformation. You either transform or you're going to be left behind, which I love very much. People here in this podcast know that I have had a chance to live in so many countries and I have changed jobs so many times. And this is part of my personal and professional transformation. So let's cut the rib. Let's jump in. And I have a few questions that I have come up with here for you, Henrique. So let's get started with the first one. You've led transformation in both startups and giants, right? A completely different scenario. And I can speak for myself. I had a chance to work for multinational companies, but as well as startups. And the environment is completely different. And drive transformation or lead teams in such a completely different environment is a challenge by itself. But you have done that. What does transformation actually mean at each stage? And why do companies resist until it's too late, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Based on my experience, right, I started startups, companies in the US. I work in big techs and big companies, both in Brazil and the US. I mentioned that before. Each stage of development of a company requires a different type of transformation and a different mindset, right? If you think about how in the process of starting a company between 1 and 10 employees, for instance, what is required for you to transform is different from what is required in a company that has more than 10,000 employees. So if you think about maybe I can split my answer into these different stages just to kind of give an overview, and maybe you can have a deep dive in one of them if that's helpful for the audience. When you're in this beginning of this process, right, between 1 and 10 employees, you're still validating your business idea, your minimum viable product, right, the MVP. So I would say that transforming on that stage is probably the most natural one, because that's where you're starting innovating, creating stuff. So if you have the customer at the center of this at this discussion, at this exploration, I think it's much easier for you to get into the right ICP, therefore the right product offering and product market fit. Moving on to the next stage, for instance, between 11 and let's say 50 employees, you're trying to then escalate the business because you have already validated the idea, the MVP, and then you're already starting to establish certain processes and rituals in the organization to be able to scale up, right? And moving on between, let's say, 50 and let's say 200 employees, then you're starting to build those rituals, how you're meeting, how you're communicating, how you're engaging the company. And as I'm speaking here, I'm thinking about the complexity of making transformation while growing the company with so many people, because people have different mindset, different opinions, different thoughts. And from the leadership standpoint of view, it's also complex to manage communication. And finally, if you think about like 200 plus employee company, that's where you're actually establishing a culture, which is the ultimate complex structure within an organization. So answering your question about transformation, each stage requires a different approach, right? Something in early stage is more natural because that's the core of the discussion of the business. But as you move along and in the growth scale here that I described, it's much more complex. And the cost of transformation is higher, but much needed, right? Let's talk about difficulty, right? You asked about how difficult it is,
Yes.
right? So I explain a little bit the complexity around different stages, but the difficulty and the challenges are very different, if I would say so. So let's start with change management, right? Transformation requires change management, and change management is not only changing a process, it's not only changing a technology, it's changing a culture, a mindset, and potentially the org structure as well. So many companies challenge themselves to actually take the next step into the growth and expand and transform. But many companies are afraid to do so just because of the cost of this change management. That brings changing the culture potentially of the company, which is something that takes a while. That means changing potentially the executive team, the leadership team of an organization, depending on the mindset of the leadership team. And that also interferes with the day-to-day activities, right? So how the change will impact to our closings, like daily closings, and so on. So there are a lot of costs associated with changes and transformation, but my recommendation would be to take a step back, look at the broad and big picture, and make sure that you have the long-term vision, which is something that I also seen in the past, that leadership wants change, but sometimes they don't have the mindset or the big vision to chase after.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness, there's so much to unpack from this answer. Let me go step by step. So, first and foremost, I think that transformation must be something alive in every single organization. The company or the organizations that do not have the mindset of constantly transforming themselves are set to die, right? Especially in the era that we live, with so many innovations coming to life on a daily basis. If you are stuck to what you did yesterday, most likely you're not going to be alive tomorrow. So having the transformation in the backbone of the organization is a must-have, not a nice-to-have nowadays. And as you correctly described, in every single stage, the way organization will experience the transformation is different. But the only thing that is that is for sure, that is true, is that this mindset of transformation must permeate the organization and part of the culture. Because something that you also mentioned about transformation is that for this to last long, it must transform the culture of this organization. And in my previous experience working for multinational as well as startups, the most challenging part of the transformation is definitely changing or evolving or transforming the culture of this organization, because the organization is built with people. They get used to the culture, liking it or not, but they get used to it, and changing this is the most difficult part. And if you do not have transformation in the mindset, in one of the values of the organization, it's going to cost a lot more, because then it's going to become a standalone project rather than the culture of the organization.
100% agree. And if it's okay, I'd just like to interject for a second, because in my experience, I've talked about transformation many times, so many times. And I think transformation means different things for like different people, different company, right? Is it helpful if we just like bring a context of potential transformation definitions?
Absolutely.
Perfect. So I think transformation again has different meanings, right? The way I would describe the one that we're talking about now is changing the business strategy, the business go-to-market, the business outcome based on adjusting the big picture, the big vision into what will drive the company growth, right? So changing, understanding what is the identity of the company, understanding what is the big vision, how to get to this place, understanding the customer, their behaviors, and bringing the changes, the outcomes of these impacts and changes into the business, right? This is what I'm referring to strategy in this discussion. So it is a big challenge, and I agree with you. Culture, if you don't have innovation, boldness, and transformation embedded in the culture of the company, it's very difficult for it to survive long term.
Absolutely. And I think what you mentioned right now is a good segue for my second question, which is about go-to-market. So when people talk about transformation, they often forget the go-to-market strategy. So they are transforming internally, and I have lived this on my own. Companies very innovative. They change things internally, but they fail on communicating this externally. So why is go-to-market such a critical piece of real transformation, in your opinion?
That's a great question. Transformation, from my perspective, what I've seen out there, usually starts with a change in the tech stack, right? That means leadership, companies, they think about getting digital, going through a transformational journey through technology alone, right? And getting a new software, getting a new technology won't make your company transform itself into what the customer needs, right? So let's talk about your question specifically, right? So when you're thinking about this overall go-to-market piece, right? You always start with the customer. Customer should be the center of the discussions, right? So what are we offering the customer? What is the customer telling us that they need? And what ultimately the customer wants from us, right? Based on those questions and those perceptions of the observations is the first step for you to drive any transformation, any change in the organization. So many companies, we call that ICP, right? Which is basically the definition of the right ideal customer profile that you are kind of servicing. Based on the finding of this ICP, the clear ICP for your company, you need to understand what is the customer journey, the ultimate customer journey, right? What are the touch points you wanna have with this customer? What are the offerings you wanna offer this customer, and so on. So once you figure that out, there is no way you can go past a go-to-market discussion or a strategy discussion. For me, strategy means a long-term strategy, right? Depending on the size of the company, the stage of the company could mean 5 years, 10 years, or something in between. But the go-to-market strategy is how you are redesigning the whole organization to be able to deliver the right value to the customer. So are you changing your sales structure to adapt with that? Are you revisiting or establishing a segmentation of customers, which for me is critical for the success of any company? Are you establishing a customer success team that will engage and support with that customer along the journey once they sign the contract and they want to get the value out of the solution? So that's why you cannot detach go-to-market, because you cannot design a proper customer journey without understanding how the org structure should be set up and how each one of the stakeholders in this journey should be acting and engaging with customers, right? So go-to-market is critical, and go-to-market is a pretty broad term, right? You can, and that encompasses a lot of stuff. Encompasses how you design the sales strategy, the sales organization, the comp plans, incentives, KPIs, and how you operationalize all of that and execute a strategy across the organization. hopefully
Henrique,
answered
this
your
is
question.
music to my ears, I can tell you. As a CX leader, this is one of the biggest mistakes I see leaders making by not listening to their customers. And I have had the chance to work to a tech giant, very innovative, and again, it's somehow disruptive in the market. However, at some point in time, when competitors starts to catch up and they were not starting or listening to the customers to innovate, that's when that distance between the market leader and the competitors starts to reduce. And that's so important, especially now in the era of artificial intelligence. I see many companies implementing AI just for the sake of having it and not necessarily using AI to solve for their clients. And that's the mindset leaders, regardless of the department, from CEOs to marketing, finance, product, whatever it is, that's the mindset they need to have. That everything starts with their clients. What is the problem that you are trying to solve? How can you make your client's life better and easier? I think the companies that are winning today are the companies that are creating ecosystems of solutions that makes the second place or their competitor far away from them. Think of Apple, think of Amazon, look at the kind of the ecosystem of solutions they have. Something that originally started as a e-commerce in the case of Amazon, for example, is no longer the case today. They have expanded to video, they have expanded to pharma, to grocery, Alexa, and so many other things that make their clients' life so much easier once engaging with the organization. And they start with the customer. It's frictionless for the customers whenever they face a problem. It's frictionless for the customer to expand, getting more solutions for their daily routine. So I completely agree with you, and that's what I said, that it's music to my ears, because it's not always the case that leaders starts with the customer. Most of the times they do have the customer centricity in their company values, but that's not how they behave. That's not how they act. And by not behaving this way, they leave behind such a big opportunity of better engage with those clients and drive more loyalty.
Yeah.
Good, but let's drown this conversation with some real examples. So at Pipefy, you drove some transformation and also the go-to-market. So can you please share with us some examples of how you did it and what you did?
Yeah, for sure. So when I joined Pipefy, we were in the middle of a process of redefining the identity of this company, right? And it's a kind of a strong company. It has kind of 10 years. It's a 10-year-old company, very AI focused, which is very critical for nowadays. So in those processes, right, on those stage when I was joining the company, we had many discussions around what is the future of the organization, how we're designing the long-term view, which meant for that size of company about 5-year plan. So we could actually understand, okay, where we're trying to go, what we're trying to get. As we started this process, right, we did a deep analysis on the potential ICPs for our company, right? The profiles, the customer profiles. And in this process, what we did, which I think is very helpful, and I'm happy to share with other companies that might be kind of listening to, we did a deep analysis on our own data, trying to understand what was critical and what was repetitive in our data that could tell us something, right? Where to focus, what is the right shape of our customers, and so on. We also did a market analysis to understand what analysts are telling us about the trends of the segment, trying to understand how the industry is moving forward, and also engaging customers, right? Real customers interviews, and potentially understanding how competitors operate and how they are targeting and focusing. So combining all of those kind of pieces together, we came up with a strong definition of what the ICP looks like for Pipefy. And along this process, we started going forward, right, and working on what the strategy really means, right? So understanding the customer, okay, how we should redesign our strategy, how we should redefine our long-term vision, and how that implicates our near-term goals, right? So understanding what are the OKRs that we are measuring, the KPIs we are targeting and tracking, as well as what is the customer journey that I was mentioning in the previous topic we were covering. Is it the right customer journey? Should we redefine the customer journey? And based on this customer journey, are we redefining roles within the organization? For instance, customer success team, sales team, BDRs, inside sales, and so on, as well as what is the right skill set for each one of those roles, right? So that was kind of a critical stage in this process to redefine how the company would look like in the next few years and how we're going to get there. And through that, right, we basically revisited all of our internal processes to support all of those changes, right? So from the operation side and perspective, how we are revisiting our marketing processes, the sales funnel, our sales processes, customer success engagement and methodologies, and so on. So we design and develop a lot of new tech homemade, right, within Pipefy, as well as we design new processes to make sure that we could deliver those messages. And we're kind of just, we implemented that in the beginning of this year, and we started to see some good results.
Amazing. Oh my goodness. I love that you give real examples, and that transformation started by analyzing data. This is so powerful. I used to say that data doesn't tell the whole story, but it doesn't lie either. So whenever we start from there, and sometimes as leaders, right, we bring our past experiences, our background, and of course that we have our gut that directs us to a certain direction, but vetting or validating this with data is so much important. That's, to me, the best balance when you combine qualitative with quantitative data to make the best decision. And using data to back up your inspiration or your gut, your feelings is really important, because as I said before, data doesn't lie. And one thing that I like it very much is that you started from there and designing your ICP, but then you also reflect this internally in the organization. One of the biggest challenges that we have across organizations is working in silos. But if we start from one main goal where the entire organization is going after to, I'm not saying that we are going to eliminate all the silos, but we'll definitely make it easier. Because most of the times what happens is the opposite. You will start from an organization, from an infrastructure, from an existing infrastructure, and then you go after your goals. But then in that scenario, you already have the silos, you already have the culture that we were talking before, and it's a lot more challenging. Whereas when you put everything, absolutely everybody in the same room and say, what are we trying to achieve? What is the best for our clients? Let's bring data to back up our conversations, and let's share the goal. Once we have these, then we work backwards to restructure the organization. I like this approach very much, and I hope that our audience is listening to this, because this is powerful. It helps so much, and it avoids so much conflict, daily conflicts that at the end of the day hold us back to move faster.
Yeah, and it's not uncommon, as you stated, right? That different teams, different departments, they have their own agendas, their own silos, right? And it's very hard to break them, right? So it's a long process. It's also a change management process, but it's critical if we're thinking about the success of the customer and how we're going to engage with them.
Absolutely. But Henrique, 10 years old is not that kind of an old organization, right? But you have also worked for other big multinational companies. So how do you balance those bold moves that are very much needed, like restructuring, with business continuity and internal alignment? Sometimes the car is already moving and you need to make changes, you need to transform. So how do you balance this? How do you drive transformation in more complex scenarios like this?
I don't think there is a one good answer, and I think that's why I like this question so much. I believe that each company has their own culture, own way of working, right? And we need to adapt the change management process to each one of them, right? So it's not only about the size of the company, but also how the company works, right, and operates. So I've seen large companies willing to move pretty fast in change management, I've also seen very small companies not willing to make the same level of acceleration in this process. And there is no good or bad answer. I think it's just making sure that the transformation follows this state of the company, right? And how the company likes to operate in a comfortable way. In my perspective, I think the quicker the better, meaning you are addressing most of the gaps towards the benefit of the customer and changing that as soon as possible. That'll help you scale up quicker. That'll help you change things quicker. But that brings also a lot of costs, right? As I mentioned before. So costs of people feeling uncertain for a certain period of time, which is part of any change management process. Communication is key in this process. So I don't think there is a right and wrong answer. You just need to understand what the ultimate goal of the company is, how the executive leadership team of this company operates, and what is the level of risk they tolerate, right? So there should be a mix. But as I stated before, I think when you're willing to make a big transformation, I think you need to speed up, right? Otherwise, competitors will just pass you by, and you're gonna miss the opportunity in the market.
Absolutely. Yeah. By listening to you, of course, that many memories came to my mind of transformations that I drove. And to me, a couple of things that are important. One, the buy-in from senior leadership. So without their buy-in, it's going to be harder for you to overcome the challenges of any single transformation, big or small. Not only the buy-in, but also the alignment, because sometimes you do have the buy-in from one senior leader, but not from all of them. And that's what I believe you were mentioning about what is the goal of the organization. If they are not aligned on what they are trying to achieve, then of course that the path and the road are going to be tougher than it should be. In my previous employer, for example, I led such a big transformation in support, but I had the buy-in from the founders to the C-level, say it's going to cause us some pain, but what are we trying to achieve is way bigger than this. So we're going to endure that pain throughout the journey, because we all know what we are trying to achieve is way bigger than those kind of pains on the way. So one is definitely the buy-in. Then the second that you also mentioned to me is communication, being transparent. We cannot underestimate the power of the existing culture. So people were already in this organization working with a specific support setup in my case. And all of a sudden, someone from the market came in with this mindset of transformation and changing things overnight, because I agree with you, the speed of transformation. I am the kind of a person that I prefer to move faster than slower, because again, transformation will have to happen. So I would rather go all in rather than one drop at a day and it feels like it's lasting forever. So in my case, someone from the market came in, started with transformation, but they were used to work in a certain way that I decided to change, of course, with the buy-in. So communicating to the organization why we are doing things. Simon Sinek says, right, starts with the why. So why are we doing this? What are we trying to achieve? And how every single person in this organization can contribute to that main goal. Because this will foster the sense of a belonging. So instead of having them reacting to a transformation that is being driven by someone else, we change this to a collaborative environment where people understand their individual contribution to something that is bigger. And last but not least, definitely have someone leading the change management. Because one thing is when you design the transformational strategy, but how this will impact the entire organization also matters, and matters a lot. So having someone fully dedicated to this change management process, that throughout my career, I haven't seen many people doing this, to be honest with you, is key. And why? This person will be overseeing that the impact across different departments, different people, and feeding this transformational leader with insights on things that must be adjusted for a more smooth or smoother transformation in the organization. So that's my experience specifically with the last one, when the transformation was pretty strong. We went from being one of the worst, I would say, in terms of supports, to become the best of the industry. But for us to get there, we had to change significantly on how we organize, and definitely put the customer at the center of our decision making, which was not something that was being done before. Throughout this journey, we changed processes, we changed the technology, as you mentioned, but moreover, we changed the culture. And not everybody bought that new culture. So attrition was part of the challenges that we had to face. So change management is definitely key here.
Yeah, and let's not forget that transformation means change, right? It's equal to change. So the human behavior is usually against change, right? That's the nature of a human being, right? So against changes. So there are many kind of it's kind of a roller coaster for most people, right? And I think in the shoes of an executive at the leadership of the company, I think it's their responsibility, it's our responsibility to make sure that the journey is as smooth as possible, to make sure that we can embrace them and talk and communicate a lot, so they can feel part of this process and understand the changes we are making. I agree with you 100%.
Nice. So I am pretty sure that the audience today got inspired by transforming things, but sometimes they also get paralyzed, right? So ahead of a transformation. So if you could tell them from where they should begin, where would it be?
Well, I think this answer for me is pretty clear. It's always from the customer perspective, right? You always start a transformation having the customer at the center, understanding who they are, what they want, what you're offering them, and if they perceive the value you are offering, right? That's the starting point for any transformation process that you want to have in your company. That's my recommendation.
Amazing. And again, music to my ears as a CX leader. You won't believe, but we are approaching the end. And I want to ask you a final question, that is, what is the main message that you want to leave this audience with? And also, how is the best way to get in contact with you? I'm pretty sure that people got inspired by what you shared today, and I'm sure there is a lot more that you can share. So last message to the audience and the best way to find you.
Sure. So transformation is not easy, right? It can become easier, but it's not easy. So don't be afraid to take the first step to understand your customers, understand their needs, and how you can service them. Make sure to align your internal strategy, right? And your go-to-market and your KPIs, OKRs, your processes towards that customer. And don't forget, right? Sometimes we think that we know the customer. And I've seen many times that we think that we know the customer, but we know the wrong customer, right? That we're not servicing the right customer. So it's a very important topic to discuss. It's it's an exciting discussion, honestly. It's an exciting project within a company to kind of revisit the ICP, understanding the customer, understanding how to make them successful through our technology, through our services, and so on. So if you're willing to make a transformation and survive, right, which is critical for survival, start thinking from customer perspective, move on along the stage, and take a deep breath, because it's not easy. It can become easier if you structure that well enough, but there are some bumps in the way. And the most important things are communication, and making sure that the executive leadership is pretty strongly aligned with this, so each one can support, so they can each one support each other. That's my message, right? I would love to chat with many people in the audience to understand their perspectives, understand how to support them if they want to have a meaningful discussion. I'm always open to those discussions. Best way to look me up is through LinkedIn. My name is here on the screen, Henrique Setton. Feel free to reach out. I'd love to have the discussions. And as part of this podcast, I would love to offer a couple of hours, actually 3 or 4 hours for 2 listeners here that can reach out to me. And of course, I would love to learn more, see if I can actually help them. But feel free to reach out to me, mention this podcast, and I'll be happy to reach out and start engaging in a couple of hours discussion and mentoring in this process. Very excited.
Amazing.
Thank you for having me here. It was a lovely discussion. I'm just open. If anyone wants to reach out to me, I'd love to continue the discussion offline.
Amazing. So transform or be left behind. That was the topic of today. And Henrique, thank you so much for taking the time, for sharing your experience, your background, and all the details of how to transform organizations from startups to big multinational companies. It was a pleasure having you here. And for the audience, I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you so much. Have a good one.